what is doing things. Okay, so first I wanted to talk about why am I thinking of what is doing things, because I guess for some people it's obvious, but for me it isn't. And this is basically because when people talk about doing things versus not doing things, usually they have like this productivity mindset, right? So for people to do stuff, it has to be productive in some way. Yeah, there is kind of this mix between, I guess for American culture or whatever, doing things has to be productive, right? And for Spanish culture or whatever, doing things can be like hanging out with your friends or whatever, except sometimes when it isn't, right? Sometimes hanging out with your friends cannot be considered doing things and it's just wasting time, right? So there is like quality time and there is like low quality time, right? So essentially, doing things, or for example, the same task can be considered as doing things versus not doing things, just depending on a simple frame, right? On a simple reframe. If you are a researcher, a PhD researcher on something, reading a book may be the key to your insight, right? So for example, if you're a philosophy PhD, reading a philosophy book, a book about philosophy or whatever, may be kind of the key to whatever your thesis is, right? Or maybe you need to read that book in order to complete your thesis and to know what other people have said about your subject. Or maybe if you are doing a PhD in media studies, watching a YouTube video is this kind of task, right? It is doing things. You have to do that YouTube video in order to write something, right? So because there is a purpose for it, it is considered doing something, right? It is considered something that advances whatever you're trying to do, aka your PhD in media studies, right? But if I watch a video because I have not made up some invented frame, because the PhD in media studies is, after all, something invented, right? It is not something that translates to something real, right? It's not. Yeah, it's like a PhD in engineering is only as useful as the advancements that you make towards engineering as a field, right? So if you're doing a PhD on something and it's useless, in engineering, it's particularly fucked up, right? Because, fuck, it was supposed to be useful, right? That's what engineering is for, right? For shit to be used. So if you're, but for shit like media studies or like philosophy, right? It's like, what is useful and what is useless? Or is everything useless, or can something be useful under the right frame? This kind of discussions, right? That's why I'm thinking of what is doing things. Then, the next thing I wanted to talk about regarding this doing things thing is Pepe Martin Garcia. I call him Pepe Minimalism in my head because he has a company called Minimalism, and he has a podcast called Open Minimalism, I think, which is talking to other entrepreneurs. He is this entrepreneur of this company, this clothing company, and he also makes videos. And in this video, he was interviewing some YouTuber who's kind of famous right now because he has a podcast that's booming and all this shit. And he at the end of the video, of every video, and basically Pepe likes to say, do things, right, as kind of a directive to the audience, right? It's like, keep doing things or something like this, right? And I find it interesting, right? Because it's like this vague, this vague directive, but it's funny, right? It's funny. I think it's good. It's a good catchphrase, right? It has some kind of twist, I guess, right? Casey Neistat as well had this catchphrase that was like, do more, I think, and he has like do more tattooed on his arms, I think. Yeah, this. He has do more tattooed here, and he has a video called do more, and this video probably has like 20 million views. Let's see. Okay, 3 million, still a fact. I think the 20 million one is this one. The Make It Count one probably has more. This was a Samsung commercial, I think. Yeah, this one has 30 million views. And yeah, he has this directive of do more, and I don't know, I like it, but I also find it kind of overwhelming to hear, right? Because it's kind of, it's this vagueness that gives it a lot of weight, right? And yeah, in Spanish it's haz cosas, right? So here I'm complimenting the video, right? And then here I'm like, the do things always makes me think. It sounds like a nebulous directive, right? It's the classical phrase that if it works for you, right? If it works for you and you were, right? If so, you've here do things and it works on you, right? You, thanks to hearing the directive, you start doing things. You possibly were already doing things, right? And if it doesn't work, there is something else that's blocking the doing, right? It's not that you don't know, right? It's the fact that you didn't need reminding of the fact that doing things is positive, right? It's because you don't know what things to do, you don't know how to do some things, right? It's the what, it's the how, right? It's not the general directive, what's problematic, right? And he says, as a reply, something, I guess, that, I don't know, I didn't really understand, which is, I think that doing things is always good, right? Which is, yeah, I guess, but things always happen if you do things, that's for sure, right? So it's still this vague tone, right? And I'm like, yeah, I agree. It's about this directive of do things, right? My theory is that for certain people to do certain things, sometimes you have to say different things, right? So you have to say things that are not the phrase do things, right? So maybe if he's an entrepreneur and he wants people to make companies, you don't have to say the phrase do things, and maybe you have to say another phrase. I don't know what phrase it is, right? This is the problem. If I knew what to say, I would say it, but yeah, maybe there are just paranoias of mine, right? And this is the thing, right? I imagine that there is something in his story where that's pushing him to say do things that was not someone else telling him do things, right? This is kind of my quest. This is kind of the crux of my discussion here, right? It's like, what pushed you to do things? Was it someone telling you do things? Maybe it was, right? Because Casey Neistat, for example, has this. Casey Neistat is an example of maybe someone who, by saying it, has maybe pushed some people to do that, right? But I think there's probably more, and it's probably more like his filmmaking style. I don't know. I would say that there is more to that, but maybe it is like the detective summed to that, right? So maybe he's doing it's like you have to learn by seeing what he's doing actually, right? So he's doing interviews with people. He's vlogging about his life and documenting his own life, right? He's talking about learnings that he's had on his company. Yeah, so that's my theory regarding this Pepe small dialogue. Then, the next thing I wanted to say on the topic of doing things is I wanted to talk about Universe's tweet, right? For example, she has this tweet of doing things is so different than not doing things, right? And I was like, fuck, I get it. And it's all in kind of this same wavelength of things I'm hearing, right? This is all kind of the same wavelength of things. And I was like, what's your definition of doing, right? And she was like, I don't know, lol, which I found funny, right? But the example I had in mind was finally posting on my therapist TikTok, right? So this is kind of, we're getting back to this, okay, so actually doing some shit that some people would consider, I don't know, useless, I guess like posting on TikTok, is actually considered doing things by someone, right? And it's like, and you can. And for example, for her case, it's just becoming more familiar with TikTok as a platform, right? And that is doing things, right? It's not wasting your time on TikTok, it's becoming more familiar with the platform, right? Because she's posting TikToks, right? So the fact that, so maybe the difference is between consuming and producing, right? But to me, when I think of this, it's like, if producing is so good and consuming is so bad, why are you producing in the first place? It's like, you can only produce shit that you would consume. Otherwise, you're part of the problem, right? If you consider consuming a problem, you don't produce the shit someone else will consume, right? That's the problem, right? You have to produce cool shit, right? Not cool. You have to produce shit that you would consider worth consuming. It's like, if you're making movies or whatever, and you don't like people watching movies, it's like, fuck. Why? Right? It's like, maybe you consider good and bad movies, right? So maybe it's like, fuck, don't watch bad movies, watch good ones like the ones I make, right? Also, it's like, don't watch bad TikToks, watch good TikToks like the one I make. But with TikTok, the problem is like that this is much more nebulous, right? And that was one thing, right? And the next thing is, here a monk is like, going to start a general failure, going to try and accumulate as many failures as possible, which is this kind of is in this theme of doing, right? And here he, like, I guess it was a good observation, right? Of course, inaction is the main failure mode, right? But here I mean specifically failures that result from action, right? So one could consider not doing failing, but you can also fail by doing. But it seems that failing by doing is better than failing by not doing, right? I guess this is kind of the consensus in, I guess, many topics, right? I guess in many money making, in just personal development or whatever, or also in like romantic relationships, is like the regret of not having said something is always bigger than having been hurt by love or whatever, right? The regret of never having had the courage of saying I love you versus the regret of having said I love you too early or something like this, right? Is worse in the regret cases, right? In like the regretting inaction cases. And it's like, I often choose inaction because I'm vaguely afraid of negative consequences in action. But yeah, this is also pretty vague, right? So it's like, okay, but what's inaction for you in this case? And he was like, not doing the thing I should be doing, right? So this is pretty straightforward, right? So here you introduce the I should be doing thing, right? So this implies that there is some kind of process, right? So there is an evaluation process of things you should be doing and things you should not be doing, right? So there is some kind of, I guess, moral directive or sense of duty, right, to the world, to yourself. You could, like, there are multiple interpretations of this, but I think, like, depending on your view, probably you can align some of them, right? So maybe doing best for yourself is actually putting yourself in a place where you can do more good for the world, right? I guess this is like the capitalist perspective. I don't know. I'm not sure about the nitty-gritty of the things, but yeah, you get the arguments, right? And then I was like, I like that, but yeah, what's your relationship to shoulds, right? Because there is the I should be doing thing, troubled or more or less like evident for you, because, right? Because, for example, here is what troubles me, right? I'm asking if his relationship is troubled because I'm not projecting, but like I'm trying to see if his is also troubled, and because mine is troubled, and it is because I don't know what the fuck I should be doing, right? It looks because everyone who is doing something important that I consider important, right? So building companies that run shit. It's like in the beginning, shit was not happening fast, right? Shit was slow. And also, if you're early, shit looks like you're not doing anything, right? Because no one has the frame of being like, oh, this is something, right? Everyone is like, no, this is nothing. But if everyone knew that it was something, right? If everyone considered it useful, everyone would be doing it in the first place already, right? So I want to know, like, what shoulds he's talking about here, right? Like how he defines his should. And then he is like, I'm sorry, it's 3 a.m. and this is from this morning. And he's like, anyway, inaction equals not doing a task that's on the path to my goal, because I might fail the task and then I have no idea how else I'm getting to my goal, and that's scary. There, we got rid of the should, right? So here the goal setting is already defined, right? So he's abstracting the should that is in the first phrase, right? So I should be doing, now it's my goal. That has become my goal. And he's narrowed the definition of inaction to this kind of feeling of failure before it happens, leading to not pursuing something that is connected hypothetically, like in the path, or that is in the path, I guess, because it's a path that has not been trodden or whatever. It's kind of hypothetical at the moment, but I guess there are predictive relationships or whatever that make it obvious that you, by pursuing that path, you will get to that goal. But it is not obvious because you can fail. But still. Oh no, because it is an only path to that goal, and by failing, you get away from the goal. Right? This is kind of different, I guess, of what I was thinking, and it is kind of, it is a sure path to there, and not doing that or like failing at that kills the goal, right? Which is interesting. Now I would want to know what goals, right? So what goals are they? What's the path to those goals, right? It's like, I would like to know. It's like, okay, so is this frame right? This is what I would want to know, right? Is this frame right? Is the well? He's not saying that there is no other goal, right? That there is no other possible, right? I guess this is kind of this reminds me of the Amazon two-way doors thing, right? Maybe it's like he feels like it is a one-way door that once crossed and failed, he will have no idea how else he's getting to the goal, right? So from the outside, before crossing, it can be a one-way door, right? That's the problem. But if you crossed it, maybe you would realize, oh, I can go back, right? Or maybe you realize, oh, fuck, I cannot go back, but I can do something else and still get to the goal, right? Or maybe you realize that you don't want the goal in the first place, right? Or that you now don't want the goal. Maybe if you before wanted, I don't know. There are like many multiple paths, I guess. And the problem is that nebulous zone there, I guess, right? And so, in this case, doing is tied to goal setting, and kind of following the path to goal setting. Right? That's the definition of doing in this frame, I think, right? That's kind of what I get from here. And then to end this video, I wanted to show this thread. I don't know why. I don't even have to say something, but I think this is kind of tied to what Monk was saying here, right? Kind of angry at myself today. I rejected the call to adventure in precisely the way I've been manifesting it for it to reach me, but I rejected it instead of trying to reach for the figurative phone. Yeah. This is kind of an example of not doing, I would say, right? This is kind of this failure mode as inaction, right? It is, the wordings are different. While here he says path to my goal, failing the task, right? Here I use the words rejecting the call to adventure, right? And manifesting. So here, essentially manifesting means goal setting, right? Manifesting is an act of goal setting. So, but not really, right? Manifesting isn't exactly goal setting, but it is, right? Manifesting is saying like, I want to be rich, but you're not treading a path. You're not tracing a path, right? You're basically putting a goal and you're saying, I want this, but without drawing the path, right? Just, you're just kind of, I think it has a balance, right? It is balanced between, I think, manifesting and the other thing, right? And goal setting and tracing a path are both useful in a way, right? Because tracing a path can get you in this state of fuck, I can fail at this path, right? While manifesting can overcome that kind of dynamic, right? You can still be present of the goal while not being overtly focused on what path to take on that to get there, right? But the problem with manifesting, I guess, is that you have to do kind of this. You have to pick up the phone sometimes, right? You you get the phone ringing, and then you have to pick it up. And here, you have to pick up the phone and dial, right? That's kind of the difference between manifesting and doing, doing things, right? And I think both are doing things. One is like actively doing things, and the other is like being done by things, I guess, right? Or receiving the things that are done to you. And here I'm angry because I hung up, right? Well, I didn't pick up. I picked up, answered, talked a little bit, and then hung up. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Bye.